why do we do dumb or foolish things? I mean, it can't be because we want to be a fool or play the fool or look like a fool. Now, it could be a variety of things, and I think they all, no matter what it is that these different things are, all around this one central thing. Basically, whatever it is that's foolish looks really tempting and enjoyable. Like something about it just calls to us, and it just makes sense to us in that moment. That's why it's so good to have counsel, which is what we talked about a couple weeks ago. Because sometimes the perspective of another person kind of can shake us from the hypnosis of the foolish thing and can say, hey, this is dumb, don't do this, or hey, this is wise, make sure you do this. And growing up, my dad tried his best to give me wise counsel on money. And I definitely did learn a lot from those talks, but don't let that fool you, okay? I did not enjoy having them at all. Like I'd rank it right up there back then with like a dentist visit or maybe like going to the DMV. Like that's just about as much as I enjoyed those money talks with my dad. Honestly, it wasn't even until like my mid-20s maybe that I started seeing the wisdom of what he had even said and the importance of handling my money wisely. I hadn't realized up till that point that I was being foolish, really, or maybe I didn't mind that I was being foolish, or maybe a little bit of both. I don't know. Either way, I'd been decently foolish with my money because just like we established a couple minutes ago, it was tempting to do so, and it was enjoyable to do so, and it made sense to me to do so with my money. Whatever I was doing that was foolish, it made sense to me. It was enjoyable. It was tempting. But what made sense didn't leave near enough dollars and cents in my bank account. So something had to change. And change is most likely going to happen when we are feeling either pain or uncomfortable. Something's just got to give. We start realizing that. And that's when we're most likely to think that we might need to do things differently. Now, I imagine that's where some of us are at today. When watching this, and when it comes to our finances, it's a point of pain in our lives. Maybe for some of us, it's isn't that bad now, but it's heading in a direction that we're not really liking, or maybe it's just not heading in a direction that we would like. Money can be a touchy subject, but that doesn't keep God from touching on it a lot in the Bible, like a lot. In Proverbs, it comes up again and again and again in different ways. That's because a wise person, we're going to find out, not only trusts in God, walks in humility, seeks wise counsel, exercises self-control, and uses their words wisely, but they also manage their finances well. Think about it. If you love and trust God enough to do everything that He says about money, well, that's a big deal. If you choose to instead make money your master, that's a big deal. And if you could get your finances healthy so that you are truly free in that area, imagine all that God can do through you. But if you're constantly weighed down by financial problems and you just keep on dealing with more and more issues and you don't know how to handle your money well, that's not good, really, is it? See, the thing is, money affects too much of your life, the life that God loves deeply, for Him to not care about this area, for Him to not want to go ahead and give you really practical wisdom when it comes to it. He's a good Father who wants to do that. Probably the most well-known and foundational two verses in all of Proverbs are Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, where it talks about trusting in the Lord with all your heart, leaning not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge Him, and He'll make your path straight. That one. Well, it then continues in the next two verses telling us not to be wise in our own eyes. Fear God, leave evil, and it'll be good if we do that. And then the train of thought continues in the next two verses, verses 9 and 10, and check it out. This is going to be important for us because it's a continual train of thought here. Verses 9 and 10, honor the Lord. So this is trusting God. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. Now, I know you probably don't have a barn on your property, let alone multiple barns, or a vat, like for your wine. If you have wine at your house, you probably have like a couple bottles here or there. But Proverbs are about principles, and we need to make sure we understand that this whole series. Proverbs are about principles. And if you had barns that were absolutely filled with livestock, and you had vats filled, like just these huge containers filled with wine, you'd be pretty set financially. wouldn't you? Especially back in the day that Solomon wrote this. You get the idea of what he's saying here. The principle here is that the best financial move that we can make to set us up for success is to learn what it means to honor the Lord with our wealth and the first fruits of our produce, and then do that. This is a huge way that we can foolproof our lives. It's one of the most important ones out of the whole series, I think. So today we're going to explore 10 financial principles from Proverbs that'll give you more freedom and joy when it comes to your money. Just know, by the way, that if you decide to ignore this stuff, I'm not trying to be scary or doomsday, but just if you decide to ignore this stuff or pick and choose based off of what you want to do and lean on your own understanding, the principle cuts both ways. We shouldn't be surprised if our finances are a mess or our lives are a mess because of how we choose to handle our money. I've been on every side of this, just so you know, which is why I'm so passionate about it, because I want more people to see the freedom in God's wisdom about money. So let's go. Number 1, out of 10 things, we got to move fast. So 1 is keep a good inventory. Profits and loss, P&L. Any business at the most basic level is concerned about profits and loss. And a big part of managing those is to know your inventory. You see, if you have too much product sitting in storage, it's going to produce losses. At some point, in some way, it's going to produce losses. But not enough, inventory and not knowing what you got, it's not going to make as much profit as you could. Now, you and I aren't a business. We're people. People with favorite outfits, people with quirky habits and various opinions about kale, which was all last week if you didn't watch it. We're so not a business that we sometimes miss a few of the things that we can learn from businesses, actually. It's interesting because back in Solomon's day when he was writing this book of Proverbs, there was a lot of overlap, a lot more overlap between the two, business and personal life. So it made sense to write a proverb like this one. Know well the condition of your flocks and give attention to your herds. For riches do not last forever. And does a crown endure to all generations? When the grass is gone and the new growth appears and the vegetation of the mountains is gathered, the lambs will provide your clothing and the goats the price of a field. There will be enough goat's milk for your food, for the food of your household, and maintenance for your girls. Culturally, we might be really far from the picture that he paints, right? So it might be hard for us to figure out immediately what on earth. But again, the principle is still unbelievably important. And the principle is this: your money and your resources, like a house maybe nowadays, or apartment, or your car, or your clothes, anything like that, they're not going to last forever, right? That's one of the things he kind of talked about, and that's true for us still. But to make the most of it, to get the best return on what you've got, you better know what you got. That's why you should have a budget. John Maxwell said it so well. He said, a budget is people telling their money where to go instead of wondering where it went. What do you make in an average month? In an average month, what do you bring in as far as income? And then the question, where does it go? Where does each dollar go? Where's its home? Where's it leading? How's your car doing? Does it need an oil change or some maintenance, or are you going to wait maybe until you get into some trouble and have an issue on the side of the road? See, godly wisdom says if we're going to honor God with our wealth, we better know all that we have. Wealth, right? That gets us to our second financial principle, because wealth seems a little bit far-stretched. But number 2, here we go. Choose to find enough in what you've got. Choose to find enough in what you've got. Like the waitress back at Olive Garden back in the day, where I used to actually enjoy going to Olive Garden, and she'd ask when, just say when with that Parmesan cheese grinder thing, that is never enough. Is never enough. It's tough being wired the way that we are, because we tend to want things. And if we're so fortunate, we sometimes get them. And then we often appreciate them at first, but then eventually we grow a bit discontented and we want more. Or we want a new one, or we just want the one that other person over there has. And it's a lot easier to want more than it is to appreciate what we already have. But there's foolishness in constantly wanting more and more and more. Just look. Do not toil to acquire wealth. Be discerning enough to desist. Like, be smart enough, be wise enough to just, it's enough. When your eyes light on it, the wealth thing, it is gone. For suddenly it sprouts wings, flying like an eagle toward heaven. Ain't that the truth? It's like walking through a desert, parched to the bone, and you start seeing a mirage of an oasis in the distance. But it's always over there. The more you walk, it's a bit further and a bit further. Just keep going. But the truth is that just like that metaphor of like how wealth just seems to always be over there and the mirage of the oasis is always over there. The truth is you still need water in the desert, and you kind of still need money to survive. But how much? Like really, how much do we need? Couldn't we be so much better off if we found more and more contentment in what we have instead of sometimes complaining about what we have and then chasing the stuff that we don't have? See, Jesus taught his disciples to pray, and I think you probably would know that he taught us to pray that God would give us our daily bread, right? Give us our daily bread. Now, the daily portion of resources that we need to keep on going on, right? Well, I think Jesus was recalling the way that God provided literal bread in the desert for Israel when they were leaving Egypt. But I also think he was had in mind this prayer from Proverbs chapter 30, where it says, "Oh God, I beg two favors from you. Let me have them before I die. First, help me never to tell a lie. And secondly, give me neither poverty nor riches. Give me just enough to satisfy my needs. For if I grow rich, I may deny you and say, 'Who is the Lord?' And if I am too poor, I may steal and thus insult God's holy name." The writer was just as concerned about having too much as he was not having enough. I wonder if we should be concerned if we're never concerned about having too much. Like instead, if we're wise, we will strive to find enough in what we already got. So, does that mean that we just sit back in hammocks and don't ever work hard or strive for more in our lives? No. Number 3, here we go. Lose the laziness. The third principle that we learn from Proverbs is lose the laziness. Now, growing up, I used to have a lawn mowing route in my neighborhood. And it was a unique job, especially at that age, because I was in control of my schedule and such. Like I decided when I'd work and when I wouldn't. I could decide when I'd go out and when I wouldn't. I discovered something potentially dangerous about that setup. If I wasn't careful, I'd find a million things I'd rather do than work. Let's be honest. Playing video games, watching a movie, hanging out with friends, doing anything pretty much other than work. Heck, even talking about work could keep me from working. I'll probably mow Mrs. Fletcher's yard this afternoon, probably. Proverbs 14:23. In all toil there is profit, but mere talk tends only to poverty. Because at the end of the day, you can't just talk about doing the work you need to do. You need to actually do it if you want to get paid for it, if you want to get money for it. And if you don't, Proverbs 10:4 says, "A slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich." And then in 13:4 it says, "The soul of the sluggard, the lazy person, craves, wants, and yet gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent, the person who actually puts in the work, is richly supplied." See, it's about knowing when it is time to rest, which is a biblical command, okay? Like we're commanded by God to rest. But when it's also time to put in some real hard work. Look at another proverb here. "He who gathers in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame." Or, "The sluggard does not plow in the autumn. He will seek at harvest and have nothing." He's not going to go ahead and actually plow and plant the seeds. So he's going to, at harvest time, go, "Well, why is there not a harvest here?" Listen, there's a lot of farming metaphors in all this. But again, it should be really clear. Here's the idea. You don't get to harvest from like a garden that you only ever thought about planting. If that's all it ever was, you don't get to have a harvest from it. We can love rest and relaxation, or even just vegging out so much that we miss the wisdom of putting in a good day's work. Whether it is sweating literally or not, putting in a good day's work. You can't expect to be well off if you're not going to work for it. And I'm sorry, but it might help some of us if we didn't get so scared of a full 8-hour workday. Like it's not that crazy, okay? I know you might feel like, "Oh my gosh, I put in 8 hours today," but it's okay. You should probably find something that you love or at least kind of like doing so that you can give it a good effort. Go after it, work hard, and even if you don't like it, work harder so you can get a job that you do like. Because Proverbs 24, let's read a couple verses here. "I passed by the field of a sluggard, by the vineyard of a man lacking sense. And behold, it was all overgrown with thorns. The ground was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. Then I saw and considered it. I looked and received instruction from what he was seeing here. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. Now, a modern version, if I could, I would say it's like this. I passed through the living room of the lazy person. What a mess. They kept saying they'd get to cleaning it someday. Bills were stacked up high that they were behind on, that they were going to get paid and take care of someday. Projects that needed done around the house, they were certain that they would get to those projects someday. But it only ever ended up being Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, but never someday. So things didn't get better, they only got worse. See, let's look at our lives. Is there some laziness maybe that we need to lose? Some habits of laziness, some just patterns where we don't work hard. Thank God that we are so much more than our work or than what we can do, but you're not less than it, okay? You're still called by God to push, to sweat, and make moves for His glory in whatever work that you're doing. So look at your life and see if there's some laziness that's eating away at your effectiveness, and let God work on you in that area. Number 4, grow your gifting. Grow your gifting. Proverbs 22:29 says this, and I love it. Do you see a man skillful in his work or in her work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. The idea is, this one's simple and sweet. If you want to rise up, and which shouldn't be our life's goal, but it's okay to kind of want sometimes, okay? Then grow your skill, grow your gifting. Learn to be better at what you do. Listen, there's a misunderstanding around out there that practice makes perfect. Practice doesn't make perfect. It makes permanent. So just because you do something a lot doesn't mean necessarily that you're getting better at it. But by the grace of God, let's learn how to be a better student, a better burger flipper, or a better merger negotiator, better distribution manager or homemaker, a better entrepreneur or teacher, whatever it is. It's not going to usually happen overnight, but growing your skill grows your opportunities. Now, it's a good lead into number 5. Number 5, spend smartly. Now, there's a lot of potential for foolishness in how we spend our money. I know because I've done it. Fortunately, most of mine have been fairly mild and quickly recoverable. Madeline is going to love that I'm calling myself out on this, but I got this tortilla maker a couple years ago because I really thought it'd be a great way to save money and be cool to make my own tortillas. And I've used it like once and it didn't really work well, so she reminds me it was a royal waste of money, but fortunately not too bad. But God has called us, whether it's a tortilla maker or other thing, to be good stewards of our money and our resources that we have. And one of the biggest, most dangerous temptations here in this particular area is to try to live beyond our means rather than below our means. Meaning we live like we wish we could afford to, but we actually can't afford to. See, Proverbs 13:7 says, one pretends to be rich, yet has nothing. Another pretends to be poor, yet has great wealth. In Proverbs 12:9, better to be lowly and actually have a servant than to play the great man, act like you're like something special, and you don't even have bread to eat. Like you can't even pay your bills. You can't even take care of your stuff because you got all these other nice things and all that. Apparently it's better, wiser, if we pretend to make less than we do. If we pretend like we can't afford Starbucks every other day, even if you can. Pretend like we can't afford a new car every few years. Pretend like we can't upsize our home just because we kind of want to. Clearly, we're not talking about being fake here, not what I mean by talking about pretending, but I'm just saying if we want to have extra money in case we need it at some point or we want it really badly, and who doesn't want that, by the way? Well, then in that case, you need to budget and live as though you make less than you actually do. Let me just ask you this as we round this one up. Are you honoring God in how you spend your money? Are you being careful? Are you being wise and not spending it frivolously and not spending it all? Are you spending it, when you are spending it, on the things that God loves? I know, a lot of times we talk about giving in the church, and I'm just going to touch on it real quickly here, but if you choose to only spend it on yourself and getting nice things for yourself, and you don't bless the thing that God sent his son to start the church and die for the church? Like, if you're not given to that, is that the way that you're going to honor God in your spending? Okay, number 6. As we talk about spending, we got to talk about this huge one, and this is dump debt. It's a bad relationship to be in with, debt. It's toxic, it's controlling, it's manipulative. It makes you do stuff you don't want to do, so you just need to dump it. Proverbs 22:7 even says, the rich rule over the poor, right? Like the people who are rich, we unfortunately know it, rules over the poor. And he uses that principle to then say, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. You borrow, you're a slave to the lender. Debt is such a bad relationship to be in. So if you haven't started seeing it, then don't go out with it. And if you already are seeing each other, then work to dump it as quickly as you can. Because Proverbs 6 says, my son, if you have put up security for your neighbor, have given your pledge for a stranger, if you are snared in the words of your mouth, caught in the words of your mouth, then do this, my son, and save yourself. For you have come into the hand of your neighbor. Go, hasten, and plead urgently with your neighbor. Give your eyes no sleep, and your eyelids no slumber. Save yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the hand of the fowler. Like, get out of there like you're an animal getting hunted down. It talks about being free or captured like being an animal being hunted. And that seems pretty intense, but debt can be like that. Like a net that constricts you and takes life from you. You end up paying more for it, whatever it was, than it was ever really worth because of interest. You can't buy other things that you want or you need because you got into debt. You lose new opportunities because of old decisions that you've made. That's why Proverbs 22:26 says, be not one of those who gives pledges, who puts up security for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should your bed be taken from under you? That's why I pointed out earlier, God tells us the wise thing is to wisely spend the money we do have rather than the money that we wish we did. If you don't have it, don't spend it. Don't get into debt for silly things that you're going to be paying for years. Now 7 kind of goes into that a little bit. Give it some time. Did you know that get-rich-quick schemes are biblical? Not in the sense that they're like biblically supported, but they are literally even talked about in the Bible. They've been around that long. Proverbs 13:11 says, wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gains little by little will increase it. That's why people statistically who win the lottery hardly ever stay rich. They just spend it all. They don't know how to handle their money wisely because they gained it quickly. See, biblically here, we're supposed to be cautious and leery of things like the lottery or pyramid schemes or a new entrepreneurial endeavor that's going to go ahead and promise a real quick return on your money if you just get in on the front end of this, or even a huge raise in our pay at work. If we all of a sudden are like, hey, you move to this job or you can go move to this position at this job and you can get this huge pay, be concerned about that. Be a little cautious. The wisdom tells us to watch out, and for some of it, avoid it altogether. And instead what we're called to do is to patiently just keep on putting in the work. Give it time, keep working, and keep waiting. Harvest is coming, but it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, just think about it. You don't ask a girl out one day and then marry her the next day. You're not going to go ahead and you don't go and give your teenager a driving lesson one day and then the very next day throw the keys to your new car and go, have a great time. You don't throw a tomato seed into your garden and then invite all the neighbors, over the next night for an all-you-can-eat BLT. Things take time. Proverbs 28:19 says, whoever works his land, just keeps on working on it, will have plenty of bread. But he who follows worthless pursuits will have plenty of poverty. Those worthless pursuits of like, oh, if you just do this, you can get rich quick, or if you, are foolish with your money, but maybe it'll work out for you if you're lucky. Proverbs 12:11 says, whoever works his land again will have plenty of bread. But he who follows worthless pursuits, this one says, lacks sense. See, Solomon's writing to warn his son, like I've told you already. He's writing this to his son and anyone else who will listen. And he's saying, real riches, they just take time. They don't happen overnight. You're going to have to work at it. It's going to take longer than you think it should. But pursuing them with haste, if you do, it's going to give you a wealth of hurt. So, Proverbs 21:5 says, the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. And Proverbs 28:20 says, a faithful man, somebody who just keeps on showing up and is faithful, will abound with blessings, but whoever hastens to be rich will not go unpunished. Now, I don't want to get punished for being a fool, and I'm pretty positive you don't either. So the key here is rather simple. Give it some time and keep a really careful eye out for the exceptions that will come along that are going to promise you a quick buck real easily. Watch out for those because it does take time. Number 8. This is the 8th principle here in our 10 principles from Proverbs about our money. 8 is don't eat it all. Don't eat it all. Now, as a guy who loves snacks, I love snacks. I love food and eating some candy and food like that. I love when I have the self-control to not just eat the whole bag or the whole container or whatever it might be, the whole thing in one setting. I need you to know I can do it. I don't know how I'm physically able to, but I can eat the whole pie. I can eat the whole thing. But I love when I don't. Why? Well, because then I can go back the next day and I can go back later and I can enjoy it again. I get to enjoy it again. A foolish person has a hard time not consuming all that they have. Financially, obviously, is what we're talking about now. They have a hard time not consuming all they have. It's there. It just kind of burns a hole in their pocket. They don't know how to say no. They don't know how to keep margin and save for later because they're a dang fool. And I'm going to be a little bit harsh because we're in a series all about not being a fool. And Proverbs 21:20 says, precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it. Like if you want to be wise, you'll leave some of what you make somewhere safe that you're not going to spend it. You'll leave it and you don't spend it now, or maybe you don't spend it at all because Proverbs 13:22 says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. So that kind of leads into number 9. Give your money to others' needs. Give your money to others' needs. Your money. I got to say it like that because that's the thing, isn't it? Let's be honest. The thing that keeps us from wanting to be generous is because it's, well, our money. It's my money. It's my money and I want it now. I can make the point if I wanted to that it's actually God's money that you're meant to steward. It's His all along and you're meant to steward it. It would be true, but for now, I'm actually going to say let's just forget that. Let's forget that. Let's say it is your money that you worked hard to earn, right? And that you've got 7 different ways that you can spend it. Maybe, let's say it's not even all on luxuries, nice things, that some of what you're needing your money for is more basic things that could be more necessary. Okay, let's say that that's what we're talking about here. But let's take a look at a large cross-section of Proverbs. Whoever gives to the poor will not want, but he who hides his eyes will get many a curse. Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in your power to do it. Do not say to your neighbor, go and come again tomorrow, I will give it, when you have it with you. Whoever despises his neighbor is a sinner, but blessed is he who is generous to the poor. Whoever closes his ear to the cry of the poor will himself call out and not be answered. A stingy man hastens after wealth, wants to hold on to it, and does not know that poverty will come upon him. Whoever brings blessings will be enriched, and the one who waters will himself be watered. One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give, and only suffers want. There is something fascinating at play here, but before I reveal it, what it is, I've got one more that I think will help us to get there. It's this one right here. Whoever oppresses a poor man insults his maker, but he who is generous to the needy honors him. His maker, God Almighty, the maker of every person in need. And when you think about it, when you really think about it, with simple math and general logic, let's just be real rational for a moment. There is no tactical reason whatsoever for why generosity and giving to poor people would add richly to your life, and not doing it would actually rob you, financially speaking. The math just doesn't add up. You have to end up with less and therefore disadvantaged by not having as much. And yet Scripture is crystal clear, and my personal experience serves, for me at least personally, to know that this is exactly true and how it works. In fact, I'm going to suggest this. I'm going to suggest it's because there's a principle that God has decided himself that he will orchestrate and he will superimpose over the world we live in. Like, I can't explain how God provides for me and for my family other than by graciously Him giving back what we choose to generously give. Now, just so you know, we're not tithing and we're not giving above that so that we can get rich quick. I heard before that you got to be careful of those things. So we're not doing it for that reason. But we're also not fearful, which is such a sad temptation for a lot of people, quite honestly, when it comes to their money. And maybe that's you today. That you're fearful about your money. You're afraid that you'll lose if you obey God in giving to the local church and those in need. You know, for us, we've done it for years and seen God be faithful to provide more than enough for our needs and even some of our wants for years. We've just chosen to see things differently. And I want you so badly to see this. And seeing is really important here. Because see, look at this verse here. Whoever has a bountiful eye will be blessed, for he shares his bread with the poor. It's about having, maybe you've heard of this phrase before, an abundance mindset, an abundance mentality. That is, just so we make sure this is clear, that's unequivocally grounded in nothing else but that God is the one who gives and takes away and who loves to be generous and loves generosity in general. Because there are some get rich quick schemes, just so you know, and I know this, that talk a lot about abundance mentality. But it's only better than a scarcity mentality, which is the opposite there, if it's a mentality that is fixed and grounded on Jesus. See, Jesus has more than enough to give, to take care of our needs. Yes, even if you give some of your wealth to others. In fact, maybe that's how God chooses to use you to be His instrument of providing for their needs. Like, what a joy that you get to have, that your needs will be provided for. He's going to make sure of that. But you'll also, in the process, get to be a part of helping someone else in their time of need as well. The reality is, especially when we look at the last verse we just looked at, this is going to just be as direct as I can be. You'll either always have enough to be generous, or you'll never have enough to be generous. That's the reality of the bountiful eye gives to the poor, because I recognize, I always have enough, no matter how poor. I mean, Jesus and the widow with the 2 mites, she had nothing, and yet she gave it away because she knew, I have something to give. If you have that view of, I have something to give, you'll give. You'll recognize the joy in it. If you, I can't right now, you'll never be able to be generous. Doesn't matter near as much on dollars and cents as much as it is on how you see. And I'm saying it like this because I don't want Satan to rob you of the joy of being generous. There's such a blessing in it, and there's such something that you lose when you're not doing it. For example, we know as a church that there are profound practical and spiritual needs in the world around us, especially in the parts of the world where the gospel is lacking a real presence. So what if we decided that it was a good idea, but we have this building project that's taking longer and costing more than expected? So sorry, global partners. We're going to have to start giving back to you later. We'll give to you later. We can't do it right now. We got a building, or sorry, ARC partners. We'll help plant churches here in the States next year, maybe, if we can. Sorry, local outreach partners. We will give financially when it's more convenient for us as a church to do that. We would not only be positioning ourselves in a really dangerous position based off of what God has said in Scripture, but we'd actually be robbing ourselves. We would. Robbing ourselves of the joy of knowing that Muslims are right now coming to faith in Christ in part because of our giving. We'd be robbing ourselves of the joy of being part of seeing new life-giving churches start up in cities all across our nation this fall, dozens of them starting up because of our giving. We would be robbing ourselves of getting to not only help our city by picking up trash or painting a bathroom at Hope House, but also giving them money that they need to pay the bills that they need to pay to keep doing what they're doing. Listen, don't lose out here. Give your money to the needs of others and let yourself experience the joy that comes with that. It's wisdom. And lastly, but not leastly, number 10. And there's a little play on words here, I don't mind it. Don't bank on money to save you. Don't bank on money to save you. Jesus famously said, you can't serve Him and money. You got to be one or the other. And we can know that, sure, but it's a whole other thing to really know that. So it's good for us to be reminded. Proverbs 15:16, better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure, and then the trouble that comes with not knowing Jesus. Proverbs 11:4, riches do not profit in the day of wrath. When God's judgment comes, doesn't matter how much money you have, but righteousness delivers from death. Proverbs 11:28, whoever trusts in his riches, I'm going to buy myself out of everything I need, or my money's going to save me, whoever trusts in his riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like a green leaf. Proverbs 16:16, how much better to get wisdom than gold? To get understanding is to be chosen rather than silver. At the end of your life, when you die and you meet Jesus face to face, he's not going to ask about your bank account balance, your retirement savings, your net worth, or even your debt. He's going to be interested in whether you accepted his payment of your spiritual debt. The debt that we owed because of our sinfulness that could never be paid off based off of our work or our money. The spiritual debt that only he could pay, and somehow he wanted to. He's going to be interested in what we did with his payment, his sacrifice, his death, and his resurrection. And then after that question is answered, he's going to be interested in the investment of your life. Did you pursue his kingdom and his way of life? Or did you try to get him to basically come along as the vice president to your empire and help you build what you wanted? When you think about it, this life that we have is kind of on loan from God. Now, he put it into motion. He decided to create you, decided to create me, and decided to give you this opportunity that you have to live life to the fullest. So I want you to imagine something as we end today. I want you to imagine that there was a daycare that had only 10 kids enrolled. Only 10 kids would show up. But man, did they still have issues. I mean, kids were going missing, like just straight up missing. They weren't paying attention to kids' allergies and kids were getting sick. And one worker even one time closed and locked up the daycare and didn't even realize a kid was still napping back in the crib. The owner heard reports about these managers that she had put in charge of her daycare, and she set up a meeting to get to the bottom of this. She wanted answers, and they better darn well be good, right? Well, what they offered instead of answers was a proposal. They said that they knew what the real problem was. Just so you know, I know what the real problem is, and insisted that if the owner didn't help them with this problem, that they'd probably continue to have problems like it. They said that the daycare's problem is we obviously don't have enough kids. We just don't have enough kids. That's why we're having these issues. Now, you'd think if that was the case, if that was a real life story, that they were crazy for even thinking that. Like, you think the problem that you're having with these 10 kids is that you just need more kids? You'd be right to think that way because it's pretty foolish. And yet it's pretty foolish if we don't understand that more money and more resources don't solve our problems if we can't handle the money and resources we already have been given by God. Instead, by the grace of God and the wisdom of his Spirit, let's do all we can. Let's do these 10 things. Let's learn. Let's lean in to God's money talk that he's having with us. Let's do all we can to pursue the most faithful handling of whatever God has decided to put into our hands. And if because of that faithful following and faithful obedience to what he says to do, he chooses to give us more, well, that could be great. Unless, of course, having a lot or having a little, having more or having less would distract us from having a close relationship with Jesus, because as it was once famously said, what do we gain? Like, really, if we work and acquire the whole world and yet end up losing our own soul? May we gain the things that matter the most and steward them really, really well.